Good morning, folks. How are we today? Got a lovely day here in Coffs. It's actually a really nice little autumn type day. Sun's shining and the golf's been on, so that's really good. So today, I hope you're all over the Easter egg chocolate-a-thon from last week. I know we are. Finished it up on the Monday. Never had any more after that. Couldn't afford it. Anyhow, so today, what we're going to do today, what I'd like to do is tidy up the box so far. Where we were at, the little things around the box, generally the last thing you do before you put your finish on. So sanding and finishing, tidying up little bits and pieces that you have to do, like if you have any faults that you need to repair, just to make things quite nice and look good, and add all the other bits and pieces that you have to do, like for instance these bits here, the little keeper there, the inside the tray, all sorts of stuff like that. So we're going to have a little go at that. But first, before I go on to that, what I want to do is I want to show you this, our new little bench. How do you like that? We've basically got the framework all done. All I need to do now is I need to put some door latches of some description on it, so that they're going to go onto that. I've got the finish done. So once we get those sorted, I'm then going to build the framework for up around the top. Okay, so it will be right up around the top here, and it'll be very, very similar to this sort of stuff here. But as you can see, with a bit of finish on it, looks really, really good. Oh, the other thing I have to do as well is I need to put a couple of shelves in it. So I've got the holes drilled for the shelves. All I have to do now is build the shelves and put them in there. So that now is basically the similar style to what we have here. Okay, so I've just sort of kept the theme going, and the same will happen with the top of the box. Okay, so it's going to look like that. Now, when we build the top of the box, what we're going to do...
The hutch.
A hutch, according to Pam. Well, probably that's about right, because it looks like a little bit of a kitchen hutch. So what we're going to do, I'll just show you this here. This is where I started with building the hutch. Okay, so I'm going to go up to the top. So what I've done is, all I did was sat down and got the pencil and paper out and started doing some little sketching. So I've got various bits and pieces. From that, I went to using the drawing board. So we've got, I think this is the best way around. You can see that I've used the drawing board. I only use A4 piece of paper, but it's a really good start. And the next thing, sort of like that.
No, go back the other way. Yep.
That way?
That's it.
Okay. So what we have here is, this bit here is going to be on the far side, and this part here is going to be the shelving for all of the jigs when they go up there. Now, all my joins here...
You turned it upside down again.
That's the way you said to put it. Anyway, let's go back to the mobile. Oh, actually, I'll go back to front. Anyway, that's what we're going to do. Now, my joints at the top of the box, if you look over here, at the top of these box here and the bottom of the box down on here, I'm going to cut dovetails. So it's going to be a dovetail frame. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce to you one of our other jigs that we do when we do that we use. Now, this is our normal B10. That's what it looks like. It's quite a large jig. So this one here cuts material between 13 and 22 millimeters, or 14 and 22 millimeters, and it's got quite big dovetails. So if you're making bigger pieces of material, bigger pieces of things that are 300 wide, this is the perfect jig for you. But if you're going to something that's a little bit bigger like this, you need what we call our jumbo. Now this is our jumbo. As you can see, it is way bigger than our standard. The other thing, and the difference between the two, is that you'll see that the distance between each of the dovetails is very different to the distance on the dovetails here. Okay, so this will give a fairly close joint, and if you look over into the corner here, you can see there's our B10 size. Now you may not be able to see that, we can get a closer view later, but that's this size here. This one here has wider spread on the joints, so it spreads the joints out a little bit. If you're making something, a piece of furniture, and you want something that's got really nice joints on it, you don't want them all jammed in on top of each other, so you spread them out a little bit, and that's the idea of the jumbo. It will cut up to 480. So if I wanted to, I could make something that went right across here that was a lot wider. So I can make something that's quite wide if I could fit it in between there and there. And that's 480 millimeters between there and there. Okay. Whereas this one here is about 300. Okay. So there is a bit of a difference. Smaller pieces, larger pieces, more spread out joints, closer joints, but router bits are exactly the same for the two. So the B router bits we sell with this one here, you can use with this one here as well, and everything's pretty much the same. So that's what we're going to do. Now that will be a project that we're going to include a little bit down the track, so that we've got you know, some sort of unit, some sort of way of showing you how those jigs work. So stay posted, and we'll get started on that. So today, we're going back to today. This is where we got up to the other day. We built the box lid. Okay, so this is the one we built. All we need to do now is fit it onto the panel, okay, onto the lid frame. Now what I did with the frame was I cut both. I'll actually bring this camera where you can see it. Let's go here. You can see I've cut the rebates for the hinges, and I fitted the hinges. So what happened was, with the box, I've got this one here, on the same thing on the box, we've cut and fitted hinges. So that was all last week. We got that all sorted. So now it's a matter of building this to fit onto that. Now, what I've done beforehand is I've trimmed a fair bit of the material off, so I don't have such a big overhang to clean up later down the track. But that's basically how it's going to fit. It's just going to fit straight onto there, like that. Now, if I just glue that onto there, it ends up with a pretty ordinary joint at the top here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rebate around the edge of here to fit inside here. All right. Now, when you do this, you need to make sure of a couple of things. Number one, you need to know where the back of the box is all the time. So work so that you know exactly where you are there. The other thing you need to do is make sure that you have the right side of the box showing at the top. As you can see with this one here, I'll go back to a mobile camera. You can see that I've got a rounded over edge on the inside of my inlay. Of course, that's going to be the top. So we want to work on there. This is the back of the box. I had that marked earlier, and as you can see, the back of the box is going to have the hinges on it. So just a sec, I'm a bit dry at the moment, so I need to have a sip. So as you can see, lots of little stuff going to happen today. Now, set up for this. The first thing you need to do is line that up where you're going to set it. Okay, so I've got a nice even distance around the outside. There's not much there, but there's enough to be able to sand a little bit off. I normally have an overlap of a couple of millimeters so that any damage that might happen during the process of putting it into the cramping block can be removed afterwards. So once we get to there, it's then a matter of making sure that you're in the right spot. Just got to make that eye even. I'm only doing this by eye, so it will come out quite nice. And then I run a line around the inside. Now, if you can see that, you can see my line here goes all the way around. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a rough measurement of that. Find my ruler. So I'll just take a measurement from here. I have 12 millimeters from the edge. And from this side here, I have exactly the same. And this side here is 12 millimeters. And that one's 12 as well. So I've got a 12 millimeter border basically around the thing. So I'm going to rebate that down 2 millimeters and then fit that inside the box. So to do that, I'm going to use our tenon cutter. Now remember last week I talked to you about the tenon cutter with an 8-degree shearing cut action. Okay, so the 8-degree angle on the teeth so that you get much more clean cut. It's exactly the same as the panel raising bit, but the panel raising bit has a curved top on it. Okay, set that to 2 millimeters. Now you only want 2 millimeters. You can make it deeper if you like. It's up to you. Again, that's the idea, is to manipulate the box to your standard or style. And then a fence. Now this fence here, I keep this fence specifically for this purpose. The rebate at the bottom of it is 2.5 millimeters. So it's just enough clearance to allow the sawdust to come out the back of it. And it is, again, a purpose-built tool. The beauty about these, you can make them purpose-built. You can make them to suit whatever you're doing, whatever tasks you're up to, and you can set it up as you want. That way you're not making a tool, or you're not adjusting a tool every time you do something. So let's get down into here. So I've adjusted that to 2 millimeters from the bench edge. Now all I need to do, remember I said I had 12 millimeters there? What I'm going to do is I'm only going to bring this out to just over 10 millimeters. I don't want to take all the material off at once. I like to creep up on the thing, and all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to feed that through the router like so. Now, one of the things that happens quite often is if your router bit is a little blunt, what you'll find is that as you feed along, it'll raise up the router bit and it'll feed over the top of it and won't cut all the material out. So you need to go over it a couple of times if you're using an older router bit. The newer ones tend to be really nice. They cut up things quite nicely, but you need to be aware of that. So what you want to do is make sure that you've got the cut happening at the corners. So all I'm going to do is feed straight through there. So we'll go to that there, and I need a push block. Remember, always use a push block. Keep it tight, like so. I need a pair of earmuffs. Hang on a sec. I need to turn the power on. Probably should have done all that stuff before I started. Okay, ears on, folks. I'm just going to cut through the first one. It's always a good idea to check that you haven't gone to the line on your first cut. Just make sure, and if you have to back it off a little bit, of course back it off a little bit by moving your fence. All right, ears on, we'll do the rest of it. What I did there is I allowed that to ride up by putting a little bit of less pressure on it. I don't know if you can see it, but right here you can see where it's cut deeper when I cut down here and not so much there. Okay, so by putting different pressures on it, you'll end up with little things like that. You don't want that to happen. All right. You can also see that I'm not quite to the line, and it's just a matter of now adjusting to the line a little bit. If your box is, or your frame is wider, longer than it is wide, you may need to take a little more off either the two end bits or the two side bits. So that's why I creep up on a little bit. You can see on this one here, you can see I've only got 1.5 millimeters left. There you go, where you can see it. I've only got 1.5 millimeters left to my line on that side there, but I've got 2 millimeters here. So I need to take less off the end than I do off the side. So be very careful about that. You want the box to fit neatly into the frame. One of the things the frame does, it actually holds your dovetails, holds your miters as well. So when that fits in like so, you can see that's just starting to recess into there. You can see it's nice and clean into the corners. So that, once it goes into there, your box or your the strength of your dovetails will actually hold your miters a little bit. So that will help the box if your miters are a tiny bit loose. So now we creep up. Now when we creep up, what we're doing, I'm just going to cut some more material out. Now what I need to do is just make sure that I don't move very far here. Might be a little further down that end, but this end here, if I just move back 0.5 mil. And that's enough at the moment. Remember, if you take half off here, it's going to come off here as well. Okay, so you're actually going to take, if you take 0.5 millimeter off, you're going to take 1 millimeter off your total surface area. So be aware that what you take off here, you also take off the other side. Okay, ears on. may have noticed then I didn't use my push block on that piece there. I'm taking off such a small amount, you really don't need to use your push block. You've already cut the depth, you're already 2 millimeters down, we're trimming off edges. So you don't need to use the push block after your first cut. What a good idea is to test regularly. Okay, so almost at the length. The width I've got to take a little bit more off than the rest of it. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move another 0.5 millimeter. You can measure exact if you want to get the perfect measurement between here and here. If you want to get the perfect measurement between there, and then transfer it onto here, you can do that too. But I find doing it this way, I'm doing it by feel, doing it by touch. And that's a really good thing to have when you're working in your workshop, is to be able to understand how things work and just have the feel for your timber and the projects that you're doing. Okay, where are we up to? Just not quite there. It's nearly in. Okay, so it's not quite there. I've got the length right. Okay, so it'll fit lengthwise. What I have to do is take a little bit off the width. All right, so that's off this side and that side. These are right. So again, tiniest little bit. Tiny little bit more. As you can see, it's getting very, very close now. You can see I'm already down on the ends, and I've just got to get that other side up. So tiny little bit more. And I know this takes a little time, but the effort is really worth it. I don't want to take too much because I don't want a gap around the inside. Okay, so now I have a perfect fit all the way around the inside of the box. So you can see that it fits nice and flush around the outside there. Let's go back here. So you can see nice, flush, clean fit all the way around. Okay, how good does that look? Nice and neat. You've got the dovetails the butterflies showing inside the box, right in the corners. They're in a really nice place on the outside. Okay, so they're fairly well in the middle, and they're just positioned just enough to balance off the insert. Okay, so that's where we're at now. Now, the next task, let me get rid of all of this stuff. I'll just set up for the next bit. Now, often you'll find that people get really excited about that and glue that in place. You glue that in place, you'll find that when you come to sand the box, it's going to take you forever to actually get it sanded because you're working inside the box. So what I'm going to do is show you what I do, how I get the next bit done. I want to mark, where's my pencil? I had one here. Just want to mark this here just to make sure that all of that goes together. And I've got a mark on there so that I put it back together exactly the right way. And that's the back of the box. And you can see why I've chosen this piece of material for the back of the box. You can see there's a fault in the timber here. And I just want that at the back of the box out of the way so that it's not seen. It's much nicer to see what I've got on the front of here. Okay, so I've marked that. Just drop my router bit out of the way. Get rid of that tool. Okay, take it off. What I have to do now is sand this surface here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand that top edge, and I'm going to sand it to 1000 grit sandpaper. Now, usually that takes me about half an hour. Now, I'm not going to take half an hour. I'm going to take a shorter amount of time. I'm just going to show you how I go about it. I've built this little platform. Now, the platform is just a piece of plywood with a shoulder added to it. I can sit that in the vise if I'm working on the vise, or I can use it to brace up against my bench, and then I can clamp that in place. Okay, so a little platform like that. Okay, so that gives me a solid work surface. What I have here on top of it is non-slip material that you can buy at Bunnings. There are lots of different places that you can buy that, and all I've done is screwed it down with two pieces on the end there. Once it's a bit ratty, then I'll just take those off, put another piece on, and good to go. So that is a really good support, and things don't slide around on the platform. I have seen people using this non-slip and just sitting it onto the bench, but I've taken it one step further. Now, the tool that I'm going to use is my little Merca Duos. Now, this is sold by Japanese Tools in Sydney, and I think you have a link. Yeah, look down the bottom. You'll
information below the post.
Yeah, so there's a link to Japanese Tools. You can buy those there, and I'm hooked up to a Merca dust extractor. So really good dust-free system. Now, the Abranet system that I use, these are the sandpapers that I generally use. 180, you can actually see through it. See that? You can see through it. So the dust goes straight through these. I go 180, 240, and so forth. There's a whole range of those. So my first one is going to be 180. And what I want to do is I want to clean up the whole of the surface and make sure it's flat. It's got no pencil marks on it, no scratches, any tear out that might have occurred. We're going to fix that as well. So it's just a matter of Ears on for this one, guys. It's not that loud. So it's just a matter of working your timber. Keep it flat. As you can hear, that's better. As you can hear, the sander goes, and you can see there's no dust at all. It's beautiful. They're a brilliant machine, brilliant system. So what I've done is, is sand that flat. Now, when I sanded the box after the lid after I attached it, put it together, I run it through my drum sander. I ran it through at a diagonal. And the reason I run it through at the diagonal because the drum sander runs this way and it tends to catch on the leading edges of the frame. So it sort of does a little bit of tear out there. But if you put it across diagonally, it runs like so. Now, going here, if you run across this way, what you end up with is score marks across your diagonally across here. I've already had a little play with this to get rid of those so that it's not going to take so long to fix it. But it's very important that you check to see that you don't have any of those score marks because they show up as soon as you put a finish on it. Now, the 180 will remove those. So it's just a matter of sanding like so. Couple of score marks here. Now, just a matter of take that one off. Next grade, 240. Just check it in the light. Now each of these grades, oh, I can stop yelling. Each of these grades is coarser than the other, of course. That's how it works. So what we're doing is when we use the 80 grit, the 180 grit, we're removing the 180 grit sanding marks with the 240. And then we go on to 320. And I go to 400. I go to 600. And then you'll see I've got a couple of discs here as well. I'll just give this a quick sand with 320. I'll go on to my 400. I want to get it right down to the finer grade. My 600. With this size sander, the smallest grit that I think they sell is down to the 600, and I think they had to cut that for me anyway when I asked for it. So because it's a flat surface and we're sanding a flat surface, I can actually use the discs on the 125 sander on this square one. So because it's flat, I can sit it down like so. And this is 800. And as you can see, they've even got a bigger one as well. Okay, so a 150. In that, I can also use, this is 1000 grit. So now what I've done is I've sanded that. You can actually see when you get up close, you can see the difference between what's done with the router and what's done with the sander. And when you look at that, it's almost got a shine on it. You can almost see that sheen that happens. That's when we get down to 1000 grit. I always do that before I glue the frame on. So let's get rid of all of this and I'll glue the frame on for you. Oh, it's lovely having an extra bench there. I need that cramp. I need this cramp. Get rid of this. Now when I glue the frame on, my glue here. A bit of a build up in there. For those of you who are flicking over to Dave today, I think he's going to be. He finished the lectern chair back last week. I'll just talk about it while I'm putting glue on here. When you put the glue on here, I'll go back to Dave in a sec. Oh, can't see, can you? When you put the glue on here, make sure that you don't get too much on the surface here. Put the glue into the groove. It gives you a much, by having that recess or the rebate in there, you actually get quite a good gluing surface, a large gluing surface. Now, as I was saying about Dave, he finished the back of the lectern chair during the week, and I think today he's going to be building the front of it. So just assembling the front legs and attaching that to the rails. It should be an interesting little bit of show. Some of the things that he will be doing will be using a Rotex and rounding over files and lots of shaping by the sound of things, so that could be a really interesting little show to watch. And as you can see, I'm not overdosing on glue. I don't want too much because I don't want to squeeze out. So it's just enough to hold everything together. Remember, you are rebated into the framework, so it has got some support. I don't want to use any nails or screws or anything like that. And that's the front. So there's my frame. So that's going to go this way. Just pull that in. Okay, so that's down. Now what I need to do is I need to clamp it. So this is where you need a whole heap of clamps. So when I clamp it, I'll clamp clamp that on the end, the corner. So I get the corners in first. Just set them up. So like so, and I'm making sure it's square when I do it, so all the clamps are nice and square. We then need one in the middle. Put these ones at a bit of an angle that gives you a bit more of a spread. In the middle of that side. Now these Bessie clamps are probably a bit big for the job. This is the 160 by 85. If you have a look at the sizing on them, you can see they're 160 duo clamp. They're 160 by 85. Now, many years ago, oh, not many years ago, a couple of years ago, somebody gave me these little beauties. Now these are 160 by 65. Yeah, 160 by 65 instead of 160 by 80, and you can see the difference in the clamp. Look at the difference between the clamps. You can see the difference. And these ones here are really good for this task, but you can't buy them anymore. It's a real shame. So if you're listening, Bessie clamp, might be a good idea to reintroduce those into Australia. There are a few people around, I imagine, would like them, because they're really good size for this task. Okay, so there we have a clampathon. Whoop, one's come off. That's better. Okay, so like I say, a little clampathon, and that will hold it steady. Now, generally, I'm one of these people that likes to use the joint as the support when I glue things together. But for this exercise here, we've got to glue the whole thing together to get it to hold, and we've got to leave the clamps on it for it to stay there. Okay, so we put that aside. That will dry. Now, through the magic of television, I just happen to have one that I already did. Okay, so this one here is exactly the same. What I've done is rebaited around the inside here and put it down on, glued it down. I did that yesterday, and you can see I've got a little overlap around the outside edge. You can see that there. That little overlap we then have to remove. Now, I generally use a belt sander, and I put it up against a belt sander and just take off that edge. But excuse me. But I don't have that in here. What I have is my little belt sander, and I will spin this around and sit that here so to show you how I'm going to go about that. So you can use all sorts of techniques. If I wanted to, I could cramp that on there and plane that off, whatever. But I'm going to use the sander because it's a little quicker for today, and you can see what's going on there. So it's a matter of turning this. This is attached to a dust extractor as well. wrong box. And so now I have the box frame sanded. Let me turn back. Nice and flush around the box. All right. So what I need to do now, as I said at the beginning of the show today, we're going to do a little bits of tidy up, the various things that we do. One of the things that I like to do is I like to put a little chamfer along the back edge here. Now, part of that reason is that it stops any binding that might occur. So if you've got your hinges a little bit close, then it'll stop any binding that happens along there. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to, it sort of looks like it should have something there. So that's what I do. Now, when we do that with a chamfer bit. Right? Now, the chamfer bit that we're using, let's just get rid of this. The chamfer bit we're using is the one that we have in our suite of router bits. It's been redesigned. There's a lot of there's lots of these on the market, so you can buy all sorts of different sizes. What we've got is we've got one redesigned so that it fits in this hole on our router table. Okay, so it's made for us by Carby Tool, part of our suite of router bits. And as you can see, it pops down through the hole. That means we're a little closer to the work and we're not actually cutting into our bench with the router bit. So when I cut that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to just run along the back edge, and then I'm going to pull this apart and I'll do the same to the box. So first of all, I have to set it up. Now I only want a small amount, not going to take much off. So if I adjust that down so that it's sort of just touching it, bring it up a tiny bit. Again, this is something that you can play with when you're designing your boxes and trying to do stuff with your boxes to make them look a little different. You can adjust the size of that, make it a bigger gap if you like. If you're making boxes, for argument's sake, this little box, if you're making this little box where you've got a hinge involved, where you're using pin hinges, you have to be able to cut a 45-degree angle along the back edge of it so that the pin will allow the box to open up like so. This router bit does it. So you need to make sure that the depth of cut that you do is half the thickness of your material. Whereas here, all I'm doing is making a tiny little cut along the back edge. All right? So, ears on, everybody. At a very small angle, very small piece on the back of that. Now I just need to strip this down and do the same to the back of that. It won't take me a second to do that. It's just a matter of take the hinge off. You'll notice on the bottom of the hinge, I've written an R for the right hand side and an L for the left hand side. Often you'll find that the holes are not lined up together, so not exactly the same from hinge to hinge. So it's always a good idea to mark which hinge goes where. Pull the rest of this out. Don't be afraid of pulling your box apart regularly. It actually helps you with understanding how the box fits together. So all my bits put aside, and I just need to go along that back edge. So ease on, everybody. So now you can see it has a definite demarcation between the top and the bottom. That little groove along there, it just looks, it looks like it needs to have that, or needs to be there. It's deliberate. So again, no binding when it comes apart. Now with the same router bit, I run a rebate or a chamfer around the top edges. Now, here again is a chance for you to fiddle with your design. This box here has a rounded over surface. Okay, it's a really nice box. Just get this up so you can see what's going on. There you go. Okay, so it's got a rounded over surface. Now the round over bit I use for that one is, and I had them all here, is quite a large bit. You can see it better on the white surface. So it's quite a large bit. Now that router bit's a T508, which is a Carby Tool router bit. It has a 1/4 inch radius on the curve. Whereas the one that we sell in our kit is this little one here that it's the 506, and it has a 3/16 radius on there, and that's what I use for the top of this little box. So on this little box I use the smaller one, on the bigger box I use the bigger one. Now you can vary those in sizes. You can have a different shape as well around the top of it. I just like to have a nice sharp clean edge to the bigger box. It's just that much nicer, but then again that's my taste. So you can have a little bit of different taste to it, and that'll be the last thing that we do today. Is I'm going to run around there and just show you how to get that sorted. I've sanded off there. I could probably take a little bit more off. I've still got a little bit of a lip on there, but I'll do that later. So all I want to do now is to cut a nice little chamfer around the top edge. Okay, so I'm going to raise this a bit. Get that closer so you can see. Like so. So I'm just going to raise it a tiny little bit, so a bit more chamfer than the back edge. So I've got about 3 or 4 millimeters into the edge, rather than the 2 mil that I had for the back edge. Okay, ears on, everybody. Now what that's done, it's taken the sharp visual effect off the box, so it doesn't look so sharp around the edges. So when that goes back together, it gives that nice clean, it keeps the shape square. So that's what I've done with that, and I've got this lovely clean chamfer around the edge of the box, and the box still looks pretty much the same as when I built it. Okay, so when you're playing around with your designs, have a little look at what you can do around the edges. If you put inlays in the box, can you get the inlay to wrap around the box, and so on. So it's a lot of bit of a fiddle, but again, like I say, each of your boxes are an individual piece. They're all bespoke boxes, and you can design them any which way you like. Now, next week, I haven't got time to do it this week because we're running out of time now. Next week, I've cut a circle of cedar. Now, the cedar piece I have here is of a darker patch, and what I want to do is I want to make a keeper on the front of it. Okay, so that's going to go onto there, but I have to shape that piece, and I've made it a little darker deliberately so it stands out. It's just a little bit different. Once you put a finish on the box here, the box colour is going to go a similar colour to that when it's raw, and this one will be a little bit darker, so it adds another little feature to the box. So we'll make that next week. The other thing I'm going to do next week is I'm going to dress it up ready and put some finishing on it so that you can see what it looks like when it's finished. In the meantime, I will give it a bit of a sand in a couple of places just to tidy things up and check that I haven't got any faults in it, and then we'll take it from there. So that'll be it for today, folks. I hope you've got something out of that. Like I say, this tidying up stuff is very, very time consuming, and that's where you sort of lose a lot of time. It might take only a short period of time to build the box, but tidying up later down the track, it takes that little extra time. So I will get that one out of the clamp, and I'll show you how that goes when it dries. So that'll take about another 12 hours or so. So we'll get that sorted as well. So we have 2 boxes by the end of the show. So if you're still interested in sitting around watching woodwork, flick over to Dave. He should be starting in a few minutes, and we'll take it from there. So have a good one, folks, and if you liked what you saw, remember, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and you'll get a reminder at least half an hour before the show. So have a good one, everybody. Stay safe, and I will see you all next week.